It's peculiar how fortune attracts multitudes, yet leaves your soul more isolated than ever before. Isabella Montgomery found herself positioned at her kitchen window, gazing out at the terrain that once provided her solace. The early morning sun created elongated shadows across the pristine fence posts of Willowbrook Ranch, each one erect and motionless, resembling sentinels maintaining their watch. But at 42, the property that once symbolized liberation now appeared more like an exquisite cage. 4 months had elapsed since her husband Robert perished in that devastating riding mishap, leaving behind a fortune constructed from livestock, petroleum wells, and property investments valued at nearly $8 million. The attorneys had guaranteed her financial stability for a lifetime. Yet money couldn't bridge the cavernous emptiness in her chest or fill the vacant space beside her in their expansive bed. The resonance of heavy footsteps on her front veranda made Isabella's pulse quicken. She hadn't anticipated any visitors, and the closest neighbor resided 5 miles distant. Through the delicate curtains, she caught sight of an imposing figure, a man so towering he needed to bend slightly beneath the porch overhang. Before we continue further, tell us your location. And if this narrative resonates with you, ensure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've prepared something extraordinary for you. When Isabella opened the door, she discovered herself looking upward at possibly the most massive man she'd ever encountered. He stood no less than 6 feet 8 inches tall, with shoulders sufficiently broad to eclipse the sun. His weather-beaten countenance displayed the harsh evidence of outdoor toil, and his attire, a faded denim shirt and worn jeans, had witnessed better times. His boots bore scuff marks and his hat appeared crumpled, yet his emerald eyes contained a desperate intensity that caused her to retreat a step. "Ma'am," he said, removing his hat to reveal thick auburn hair streaked with gray. "My name's Marcus Thompson. I learned about your husband's passing, and I require employment." Isabella's initial impulse was to shut the door. This stranger appeared intimidating, and she remained alone on this secluded ranch. However, something in his voice, a vulnerability beneath the gruff exterior, made her hesitate. "I apologize, but I'm not seeking employees," she said, maintaining her grip on the doorframe. "I'm actually contemplating selling the ranch." Marcus's expression fell, and momentarily this colossal man resembled a lost child. "Please, Mrs. Montgomery, I've been unemployed for 2 months, lost my position at the Richardson place when they went bankrupt. I have nowhere else to turn." "I understand your circumstances, but I cannot." "I can accomplish anything," Marcus interrupted, his voice cracking slightly. "I can repair fencing, handle cattle, maintain machinery. I'm strong, dependable, and I don't drink or create problems. I simply need an opportunity." Isabella studied his face, observing the desperation he attempted to conceal. His jaw was clenched, and she noticed his hands trembling slightly as he held his hat. This wasn't merely about needing work. This was about survival. "Where have you been residing?" she inquired. Marcus's cheeks flushed crimson. "Been sleeping in my pickup mostly. Sometimes the shelter in Denver when it's too frigid." The words struck like harsh reality, laid bare on the table. Plain and unrefined. Here stood this enormous man, capable of physical labor that could probably sustain any ranch operation, reduced to sleeping in his vehicle. Isabella felt a sharp pang of sympathy, but also exhaustion. "I'm sorry, Mr. Thompson, but I truly cannot." "Please," Marcus said, and to Isabella's astonishment, he dropped to one knee on her porch. This giant man kneeling before her like a medieval knight made the scene almost surreal. "I'm pleading with you. Grant me a chance. I'll work for half wages, just room and board. I'll prove my worth." Isabella's heart raced. The sight of this massive man humbling himself so completely was both touching and disturbing. She glanced around nervously, grateful that none of the neighbors could witness this display. "Stand up," she said quietly. "Please just stand up." Marcus rose slowly, his face burning with embarrassment. "I'm sorry, ma'am. I didn't intend to. I just don't know what else to do." Isabella closed her eyes, fighting an internal struggle. Every logical part of her mind screamed warnings about allowing a strange man onto her property. But the widow in her, the part that understood loneliness and desperation, couldn't ignore his plea. "There's a bunkhouse," she said finally. "It hasn't been occupied in 2 years, so it probably requires cleaning. If you want to stay there for several days while you search for other work, I suppose that would be acceptable." Marcus's face illuminated with such genuine relief that Isabella felt her heart soften, despite her better judgment. "Thank you, ma'am. Thank you so much. I promise you won't regret this decision." But as Isabella watched Marcus walk toward the old bunkhouse, his broad shoulders set with renewed determination, she wondered if she already did regret it. Over the following week, Marcus proved himself to be exactly what he'd promised. He repaired 3 sections of fencing that had been damaged in a recent storm, cleaned out the barn that Isabella had been dreading to tackle, and even fixed the stubborn water pump that had been troubling her for months. But his presence also brought an uncomfortable awareness that Isabella hadn't anticipated. She found herself observing him work from her kitchen window, mesmerized by the way his massive frame moved with surprising grace. When he removed his shirt in the afternoon heat, revealing a chest and arms sculpted by years of hard labor, Isabella felt stirrings she hadn't experienced since Robert died. The guilt struck her like a physical blow. How could she be having these thoughts about a stranger when her husband had been deceased for only 4 months? On Friday evening, Marcus knocked on her door, hat in hand as always. "Mrs. Montgomery, I wanted to thank you again for allowing me to stay. I know it's been a week, and I don't want to overstay my welcome." Isabella had been dreading this conversation. The truth was, she'd grown accustomed to seeing Marcus around the property. The ranch felt less empty with him there, and she slept better knowing someone was nearby. "Have you found other employment?" she asked. Marcus's jaw tightened. "I've applied at every ranch within 50 miles. Most won't even see me once they hear I don't have references from my last job." "Why don't you have references?" Marcus looked down at his boots, clearly uncomfortable. "There was an incident. Nothing illegal, but let's just say the rancher's daughter took a liking to me, and her father didn't appreciate it." Isabella felt a flash of something jealousy at the mention of another woman. "I see. It wasn't what you think," Marcus said quickly. "She was married, and when she started making advances, I turned her down. But her husband caught her trying to kiss me in the barn, and, well, it looked bad." "So you were fired for something you didn't do?" "Story of my life," Marcus said bitterly. "Being this size, people always assume the worst. They think I'm aggressive or dangerous or that I take what I want." Isabella studied his face, seeing the hurt behind the anger. "But you don't." "No, ma'am. I was raised to respect women, to work hard, and to earn my keep, but apparently that doesn't matter much when you're 6'8" and broke." The vulnerability in his voice made Isabella's chest tighten. She made a decision that surprised even her. "Stay," she said. Marcus's head snapped up. "Ma'am, stay and work for me. I'll pay you a fair wage, and you can live in the bunkhouse. I need help with the ranch, and you need work. It makes sense." For a moment, Marcus just stared at her as if he couldn't believe what he was hearing. Then, to Isabella's amazement, his eyes filled with tears. "You mean it?" "I mean it." Marcus's shoulders sagged with relief, and for the first time since she'd met him, he smiled, a genuine, transformative smile that made him look years younger. "Thank you, Mrs. Montgomery. I won't let you down." But as Isabella watched Marcus walk back to the bunkhouse, she wondered if she was making a terrible mistake. The attraction she felt toward him was growing stronger each day, and she wasn't sure she had the strength to resist it much longer. 2 months into their arrangement, Isabella and Marcus had fallen into a comfortable routine. He worked the ranch during the day, while she managed the business side from her office. In the evenings, she would sometimes bring him dinner, and they would sit on the bunkhouse porch talking about everything and nothing. Isabella learned that Marcus had grown up in foster care after his parents died in a car accident when he was 12. He'd been bounced from home to home, never staying anywhere long enough to feel settled. His size had made him a target for bullies and suspicion from adults who saw him as a potential threat. "I always dreamed of having a place of my own," he told her one evening, as they watched the sunset paint the sky in shades of orange and pink. "Somewhere I could put down roots, maybe have a family." "Why haven't you?" Isabella asked. Marcus's laugh was bitter. "Hard to start a family when you can't keep a job. Women want security, stability. They don't want a man who's been sleeping in his truck." Isabella felt a pang of sympathy mixed with something deeper. The right woman would see past that. Would she? Marcus turned to look at her, and the intensity in his green eyes made her breath catch. Would you? The question hung between them, loaded with implications that neither of them was ready to address. Isabella stood abruptly, her cheeks flushing. I should go, she said. Early morning tomorrow. But as she walked back to the house, she could feel Marcus's eyes on her, and the weight of unspoken possibilities followed her into her lonely bed. The breaking point came on a rainy Thursday in November. Isabella had been in town for a meeting with her lawyer about selling some of Robert's business interests when she returned home to find Marcus in her kitchen, soaking wet and shivering. What happened? She asked, rushing to get him a towel. Roof's leaking in the bunkhouse, he said, his teeth chattering. Been trying to fix it, but the rain's coming down too hard. Isabella looked at this giant man, wet and miserable, and felt her heart clench. You can't stay out there tonight. You'll get sick. I'll be fine. No, Isabella said firmly. You'll stay here. I have a guest room. Marcus hesitated. I don't think that's a good idea. Why not? The question came out more challenging than Isabella intended, and Marcus's eyes locked with hers. In that moment, the pretense they'd been maintaining crumbled. Because, Marcus said quietly, I'm in love with you. The words hit Isabella like a physical blow. She'd suspected, had seen the way he looked at her, but hearing it spoken aloud made it real. Marcus. I know I shouldn't be, he continued, his voice gaining strength. I know you're out of my league, that you're grieving, that this is inappropriate, but I can't help it. You're beautiful, you're kind, and you saw something in me when no one else would. Isabella felt tears pricking her eyes. This can't happen. Why not? Because you work for me. Because my husband just died. Because people will talk. Let them talk, Marcus said, stepping closer. I don't care what people think. I care about you. Isabella backed away, her heart racing. No, this is wrong. Is it? Marcus's voice was soft now, pleading. Or are you just afraid? The accusation stung because it was true. Isabella was afraid. Afraid of what people would think, afraid of dishonoring Robert's memory, afraid of the intensity of her feelings for this man who was so different from anyone she'd ever known. Please leave, she whispered. Marcus's face fell, but he nodded. I'll pack my things in the morning. No, Isabella said quickly. Don't leave the ranch, we need to maintain boundaries. But as Marcus walked out into the rain, Isabella knew that some boundaries, once crossed, could never be uncrossed. The next few weeks were torture for both of them. Marcus threw himself into his work with renewed intensity, as if physical labor could exhaust the emotions he was trying to suppress. Isabella found herself watching him from her window, torn between longing and propriety. The tension came to a head when Isabella's sister-in-law Victoria arrived for an unexpected visit. Victoria had never liked Isabella, had always thought she'd married Robert for his money, and now she saw an opportunity to cause trouble. Who is that man? Victoria asked, watching Marcus repair a fence post with practiced efficiency. My ranch hand, Isabella said carefully. He's enormous, Victoria said with distaste. Where did you find him? He needed work. Victoria's eyes narrowed. How well do you know him? Have you done a background check? A man that size could be dangerous. Isabella felt her temper flare. He's not dangerous. He's a good man. Is he? Victoria's voice was sly. Because I've been asking around town and people are talking. They're saying you're having an affair with your hired help. Isabella's cheeks burned. That's ridiculous. Is it? You're a wealthy widow alone on this ranch, with a man who looks like he could snap you in half. What are people supposed to think? The cruel words hit their mark. Isabella had been so focused on her own feelings that she hadn't considered how their situation might appear to others. I think you should fire him, Victoria continued, before this gets out of hand. That evening, Isabella found herself at the bunkhouse door, her heart heavy with the conversation she had to have. Marcus answered on the first knock, his face lighting up when he saw her. Isabella, he said, then caught himself. Mrs. Montgomery, what can I do for you? We need to talk. Marcus stepped aside to let her in, and Isabella was struck by how neat and sparse the bunkhouse was. A single bed, a small table, a few books. This was the entire world of a man who had nothing but was grateful for everything. People are talking, Isabella said without preamble. Marcus's face hardened. About us? About the impropriety of our situation, a widow and her hired hand. Let them talk. I can't, Isabella said, her voice breaking. I have a reputation to maintain, Robert's memory to protect. Marcus was quiet for a long moment. When he spoke, his voice was strained. Are you firing me? Isabella closed her eyes. I think it would be best. The silence stretched between them, heavy with unspoken pain. When Isabella opened her eyes, Marcus was looking at her with such raw hurt that she almost took back her words. I understand, he said quietly. But as Isabella turned to leave, Marcus's voice stopped her. What if there was another way? Isabella turned back, confused. What do you mean? Marcus took a deep breath, and then, to Isabella's shock, he dropped to one knee again. But this time, the gesture was different, more desperate, more raw. Marry me, he said. Isabella's heart stopped. What? I know how it sounds, Marcus said, his voice rushing now. I know I'm not good enough for you, that I have nothing to offer. But I love you, Isabella. I love you more than I've ever loved anyone, and I think you might love me too. Isabella's knees felt weak. Marcus, I can't. Please, Marcus said, and his voice broke. Please don't send me away. I can make you happy. I can give you everything you need. I can even... He swallowed hard, his cheeks flushing. I can even give you children. The words hung in the air like a confession, raw and vulnerable and completely inappropriate. Isabella stared at this giant man kneeling before her, offering everything he had, his love, his life, his future children, and felt her world tilt. Get up, she whispered. Not until you answer me. This is insane. Is it? Marcus's eyes were bright with unshed tears. Or is it the most honest thing either of us has ever considered? Isabella looked at him, really looked at him, and saw not just a desperate man, but a man who had been knocked down by life repeatedly and kept getting back up. A man who had been judged by his size and circumstances, but had never let it harden his heart. A man who was offering her not just companionship, but passion, devotion, and a future she'd never imagined. People will say I'm crazy, she said softly. Are you? Isabella thought about the months since Robert died, the loneliness, the empty house, the way Marcus had brought life back to her world. She thought about the way he looked at her, the way he made her feel alive and desired and cherished. Maybe, she said, and then to her own surprise she smiled. Maybe I am. Marcus's face transformed with hope. Is that a yes? Isabella looked at this man who had humbled himself before her, who had offered her everything he had, and realized that sometimes the most extraordinary love stories began with the most ordinary desperation. Yes, she whispered. Marcus rose slowly, and when he pulled her into his arms, Isabella felt like she was finally coming home. The wedding was small, just Isabella, Marcus, and a justice of the peace in the courthouse in Denver. Isabella wore a simple blue dress, and Marcus had bought his first suit with his saved wages. They both knew that by the time they returned to the ranch, word would have spread throughout the county. They were right. The phone started ringing before they even got through the front door. Isabella's friends were shocked, concerned, and in some cases, horrified. Victoria called 3 times, each conversation more heated than the last. You've lost your mind, Victoria said during the final call. Marrying a man you've known for 3 months, a man who has nothing. People are saying you're having a nervous breakdown. Isabella looked across the kitchen at Marcus, who was preparing dinner with the same careful attention he brought to everything else. He caught her watching him and smiled, the same transformative smile that had made her fall in love with him. Let them say what they want, Isabella said calmly. I'm happy. And she was. Over the following weeks, as the gossip swirled around them, Isabella discovered that Marcus had been right about one thing. She didn't care what people thought. For the first time in her life, she was living for herself, not for appearances or expectations. Marcus moved into the main house, and Isabella was amazed by how naturally they fit together. He was gentle and considerate, treating her like precious cargo while also making her feel strong and capable. He listened to her ideas about expanding the ranch operation, and his practical knowledge complemented her business acumen perfectly. The physical side of their relationship was a revelation. Marcus's size had initially intimidated Isabella, but his tenderness and patience made her feel safe and cherished. He worshipped her body with the same reverence he'd shown her kindness, and Isabella found herself responding with a passion she'd never known she possessed. 3 months after their wedding, Isabella's period was late. When the pregnancy test showed 2 pink lines, she stared at it in wonder. Marcus found her in the bathroom, tears streaming down her face. "What's wrong?" he asked, immediately concerned. Isabella held up the test, and Marcus's face went through a series of emotions: surprise, joy, and finally pure elation. "Really?" he whispered. "Really?" Marcus dropped to his knees again, but this time he pressed his face against Isabella's still flat stomach, and she heard him whisper, "Thank you." Isabella ran her fingers through his hair, marveling at how far they'd both come. The man who had arrived at her door desperate and broken was now her husband, her partner, and the father of her child. The pregnancy announcement silenced many of the critics. Whatever people thought about their whirlwind romance, the fact that Isabella was carrying Marcus's child made their marriage undeniably real. Even Victoria, faced with the prospect of a new nephew or niece, began to soften her stance. As Isabella's belly grew, so did their happiness. Marcus was attentive and protective, treating her pregnancy like the miracle it was. He would spend hours talking to the baby, his large hands gentle on Isabella's rounded stomach, and Isabella would watch him with wonder. "I never thought I'd have this," he told her one evening as they sat on the porch, watching the sunset paint the sky in brilliant colors. "Have what?" "A family, a home, someone who loves me." Isabella leaned against his shoulder, feeling the solid strength of him. "I never thought I'd have this either." "What? Another baby?" "No," Isabella said softly, "a love story." Marcus turned to look at her, and in his green eyes, she saw their future, their child, their ranch, their life together. It wasn't the life she'd planned, but it was the life she wanted. "I love you," he said, and the words were no longer desperate or pleading. They were sure, confident, and full of promise. "I love you too," Isabella replied, and meant it with every fiber of her being. As they sat together in the gathering dusk, Isabella reflected on how strange life was. Wealth might draw crowds, but it had taken a penniless giant of a man to show her that the heart didn't have to be the loneliest place on earth. Sometimes, if you were brave enough to open it, it could be the most wonderful place of all. The baby kicked, and Marcus's face lit up with joy. Isabella smiled, knowing that their love story was just beginning. Whatever challenges lay ahead, they would face them together. The rich widow and the giant cowboy who had dared to ask for everything and against all odds had been given it. In the distance, a coyote howled, and the sound carried across the vast Colorado landscape like a song of hope. Isabella closed her eyes and listened, feeling more at peace than she had in years. She had found her home, her love, and her future in the most unexpected place, in the desperate plea of a man who had nothing left to lose and everything to gain. Their story would be told in whispers around the county for years to come, but Isabella didn't care. Let them whisper. Let them wonder. She had found something worth more than all the wealth in the world. She had found love, and that was enough. The stars began to appear in the darkening sky, and Marcus's arm tightened around her. Isabella smiled, knowing that whatever tomorrow brought, they would face it together. The lonely widow and the desperate cowboy had found their happy ending, and it was more beautiful than either of them had ever dared to dream.